Alright, alright, alright. Yo. Welcome to the stream, How y'all doing? Back at it again with another stream. You already know the vibes. There ain't no stopping me. Alright. That. Alright. Let's get to this. Setting that up. So we're gonna continue from where we left off last time. Not too sure on YouTube side if it's getting it good. Cause last time we did this, the heck? What the heck? Ambulance just drove by. That's weird. Let's see.
When the next presidential election comes, and believing that Trump will not be on the ballot, but probably a Trump acolyte would be on the ballot, would you consider voting for a more liberal candidate, or would you stick Republican?
I will probably vote for whoever hates Israel the most. I think they have our country in a vice grip. They control our foreign policy, and now, especially with the Trump administration, our domestic policy, college campuses and stuff. I'm sort of a one-issue guy until this is fixed. So if I voted for Jill Stein this last time, I didn't vote for Trump, but I am far right. But I voted for Jill Stein because the only one who wanted to stop a genocide that we're funding. I think a lot of people are similar to me in that.
David, thank you very much for calling and sharing with us, and continue to listen to the show. I don't classify us as far left. I think we are pretty centrist here most of the time, and I hope that you feel that way too. David, thank you for calling. Let's move on to Brian from Montrose. Brian, what's on your mind?
Good afternoon. This is Brian from Montrose. I don't believe it's so much about the president. Now, I am a diehard Democrat, okay? But
good, we get them from both ends of the spectrum on our show. Thank you.
I know. I don't think it's so much about the president. I think it's about all those other powerful people that could be in that file. And I think it worked both ways with Trump and also with Biden. Those are personal friends of theirs, and they really don't want that out there. If you can just kind of, put it under the carpet for a couple of more years until another crisis comes along, like the government shutdown, God forbid.
Yeah.
That's basically how I feel about
Take
it.
my keys out of my pockets.
If you really want to put this in bed, release everything.
Brand new truck.
You can do that.
0
you can
miles.
To the water. You can bomb Iraq. All this other kind of stuff. You can obviously direct your DOJ to release everything and just put it to bed. Or I shouldn't put it that way. That's probably the wrong one.
Brian, I know what you mean, though, but thank you for sharing. I think
save up,
you are
get a
definitely
Mosul.
onto something there. The concern that
I'm
look
getting a
at is
fucking
if, in fact, Trump is
truck whip.
not necessarily
I
a
don't need a
perpetrator
super
that
racing
is
wheel.
revealed in these files, that people
I'm
feel
driving
like, well,
enough,
we don't
or
need
racing
to
enough, I'm
continue
cut
this.
up
But
enough
the
for
point is, they are probably
if anything,
friends,
I got the lie
associates. There's a
detector
reason
cutting out
that
fucking driving
some
trucks.
faction is working so hard not to release this information,
Keep the
and even if
muzzle.
they are not necessarily named specifically, there is concern there, and I think they should be released, and we should know across the board who it is.
And we're going to head to Kelly from the Woodlands. Kelly, welcome to Hello Houston. Caution,
Hi there.
please mind
I just
the
want to
speed.
make a comment about the file situation. And that is, if we don't release the files, then what it does is send a message to everybody that did atrocities to young women and girls and it allows them to keep thinking they can keep doing it because they didn't get caught. And that is unbelievably a bad message to send to people that did awful things to a vulnerable population of people.
Thank you, Kelly. And to the other side of that, it also sends a message to young girls that your voice doesn't matter. We're not going to believe it. Justice won't happen. You don't have to say things. And so I think that just in the way, just the message across the board is it speaks very loudly. And so I agree, Kelly, that this needs to be resolved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly, for giving us a call.
There's a lot to this, and I know we're not anywhere near done talking about this story. I do hope that the next time or in the near future when we talk about it, it's because these files have been released.
And I do think it's very interesting that we heard from people that listen to Hello Houston from the left and the right and in the middle. And I think there's an across-the-board consensus. Release the Epstein files.
And you know what they're telling us? Release ourselves from talking on this topic and go to our break.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll speak with Chase Untermeyer, professor of practice at the Hobby School of Public Affairs and the University of Houston, and Lauren Steffi, writer-at-large for Texas Monthly, about the local and national legacy of former Vice President Dick Cheney. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
All right. Let's check my phone real quick.
Time to hit the road. Can't get enough PBS programming? PBS Passport is an added member benefit that offers exclusive streaming access to many of your favorite programs on the PBS app. Whether you're an NPR listener, a PBS watcher, or both, your ongoing donations of at least $5 per month qualify for PBS Passport. Make your gift now to start watching at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Hi, I'm Ken Burns. The American Revolution was a war for independence, a civil war, and a world war. I invite you to watch our new documentary series, The American Revolution, right here on Houston Public Media, TV 8.
Premiering Sunday night at 7.
On the next Science Friday, Ardem Patapoutian came to the U.S. at the age of 18, escaping violence in Lebanon.
In public, even when I was an assistant professor, I would say things like I'm a researcher. I wouldn't say I'm a scientist.
He went on to win the Nobel Prize for studying the biology behind the sense of touch. That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Coming up tomorrow on News 88.7.
Support comes from the Grand 1894 Opera House, presenting Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis on Friday, November 14th at 8 p.m. Featuring the music of Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, and more. TheGrand.com. Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages. More information at GenPro.com or by calling 713-597-3521.
Finding a new route.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
I'll
now
find
here's
a new
Celestia
route.
Sherman and Ernie Manous.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney passed away last week, leaves behind a political legacy that is both acclaimed and controversial. What some people might not know are his connections to Texas and the Houston area. To tell us more about Cheney's national, international, and local legacy, we welcome Chase Untermeyer, professor of practice at the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston, and Lauren Steffi, writer-at-large for Texas Monthly. Chase, Lauren, welcome to Hello Houston. If folks listening want to join the conversation, if you would like to join in, give us a call, 713-440-8870. You can call or text. I guess I'll start, Chase, with you here in the studio right off the bat. You think about Dick Cheney and a lot of different thoughts come to mind. And we saw a career where, depending on where you were on the political spectrum, at different points, you either loved him or didn't love him so much, and it tended to shift. Unique unto him as a political figure to have that kind of dichotomy of appreciation and to see it shift over time.
could count the shift from the time he became vice president. Before then, I would say that Dick Cheney's reputation was one of the best you could hope for in national government, and one of the longest, because he became chief of staff to President Ford back in the 70s when Cheney was, I believe, 34. And he was chosen as Secretary of Defense by the first President Bush because that immediately followed the defeat of the president's nomination of former Senator John Tower for Secretary of Defense. And it was felt after all the allegations raised against Senator Tower, which I think were uncalled for.
Oh, it's San Francisco.
They needed somebody of unquestioned respect and reputation in Washington.
If you played Watch Dogs 2,
filled that particular slot. In later times, when he was vice president, that's when the controversy really began.
Yeah, but then, Lauren, it shifted again afterwards. And once again, it depends where you are in the political spectrum, where you fall at what times with him. But your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, you know, he left the Defense Department and he went into the business world. He became CEO of Halliburton, and he was really chosen for that role because Halliburton was trying to expand internationally, and they wanted somebody with a lot of international contacts who could open doors. And you know, Cheney obviously knew a lot of world leaders by that point. You know, a lot of them
being up there when you coming into San Diego, bro, it's beautiful. Being up there on that bridge, driving through that shit.
To help them, you know,
oh
get
shit!
into these new areas
International,
you know, it depends on who you ask. Like many other things with Cheney, it depends on.
That was a smoke shop. I should have stopped and went in there. Got a little blaze.
How well he did. Shareholders have certain
Okay.
From your point of view, what kind of a CEO was he, and how did that pair up with how he performed as a vice president? Do we see common trends in behavior, in ways he approached situations, how he solved problems, or is there a difference depending on what it is?
Well, it's interesting. If you talk to people within the company, they'll tell you that he was actually a very good CEO, and he was much more hands-on than they expected, or that he was really intended to be, because again, he was sort of supposed to be a rainmaker or a figurehead that would open up these international markets. But he did actually get fairly involved in the business, and that has a mixed track record. I mean, he oversaw the acquisition of Dresser, which ultimately led to a lot of asbestos claims that led to the bankruptcy of KBR, the KBR subsidiary. You know, and that had put a big drag on the stock for a good number of years. You know, all of this stuff, by comparison, seems relatively small potatoes when you look at you know, sort of the business and political realm of today, of course. Yeah.
You know, for me, whenever I think of the former Vice President Dick Cheney's legacy, I often go to 9/11, because for me at that time, I was young, and he was often described, I think, as one of the most powerful vice presidents because of his central role in the architecture of the post 9/11, you know, war on terror. And I'm curious about how much of that, from the public standpoint, continues on in his legacy today, right now, because of after now that he has passed.
I definitely want to answer that question, but I think an important point should be made that, as we learned in high school civics, the vice president does not have any authority.
Yes.
The vice president is not in the military chain of command. The vice president, for historical reasons, was often laughed at as being so famously weak. Cheney changed all that, and as a result, we really can't compare being a vice president with being the CEO of even a small company, let alone a big company like Halliburton. However, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, he was the only ranking person in the White House. President Bush was in Florida, and it was a very signal moment when Cheney, in the Situation Room or wherever he was taken, was asked the question by a military officer whether the United States should shoot down the airliner that eventually crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. At the time, it was headed toward Washington. And Cheney made a statement, a decision, if you will, that was wholly presidential. But he didn't hesitate to do that because he knew that President Bush was not available for that decision. As things turned out, tragically for the passengers either way, they crashed was never a moment when U.S. forces had to shoot it down.
But to go back to my earlier question that I asked Lauren, though, also, the behaviors and what you're talking about that you see on 9/11 that has become kind of the legacy of him, did he perform similarly as a CEO, or did he have a different, having come up the way he had through the public channels and service to the government, did that more shape how he became a CEO? I guess I'm wondering which came first, the chicken or the egg, in the way he approached life.
Well, in this case, we know it was the chicken. Namely, he was CEO of Halliburton before he was vice president. Right. But he was CEO of Halliburton after his prior service in government, which he clearly knew the limits of a vice president. He was chosen vice president, that is to be on the ticket with George W. Bush, because he brought to the potential administration a knowledge of how national security works, including in crisis situations. So while, of course, nobody knew what kind of crisis would crop up, there was a great deal of confidence that Cheney, with his experience, but also his private lessons in how to act in crises, that is, in simulated situations, would be a calm, steady, decisive person.
Yeah. But later in life, he seems to, I don't know, and you guys can help me with this, I don't know if he changes position in more social terms or if he just becomes more vocal about his feelings on them. And I'm talking about how he supported or didn't support President Trump, how he kind of moved away from where the Republican Party was going. What can we take from that in understanding it?
We can set aside the question of how he voted and whom he endorsed in 2024 in order to speak to the fact that throughout his public life, he operated very quietly, some might say stealthily. It was not his aim whatsoever to have a profile. Now, as vice president, particularly on a day like September 11th, he could not avoid being seen in a high-profile circumstance. But mostly, and I saw this most intimately when he was Secretary of Defense and I was on the White House staff, he much preferred to have no profile, no identification with the matter at hand, even though he was heavily involved in it. I interpret his endorsement of Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in 2024 as a statement on Trump's personality and on Cheney's experience with prior presidents who operated wholly different from Donald Trump. And as a result, while I can't speak for the late vice president, I think Trump violated Cheney's sense of how a president should act.
Right, and as you talk about, he tended to want to be kind of more very integral in the behind the scenes of the inner workings of the White House. He really was, though, a major advocate on the expansion of the executive power. And so how do you think he was successful in kind of reshaping the party in that regard?
Partly it's because he knew exactly what he believed,
and then
that yes, there should be a much more powerful president, particularly vis-a-vis the Congress.
Turn left.
He had that sense first implanted, I would say, back in the 70s, because in the Vietnam post-Watergate period, the Congress was highly assertive. It was controlled heavily by Democrats, so there was a political aspect, but there was also the philosophical aspect of should a president defer to Congress as much as Cheney felt Ford was forced to do. And that sentiment only grew as years went by, and particularly in the period that we've been discussing when he was vice president.
I don't know, Lauren, if this makes sense the way I'll ask this question, but I'll let you take it however you want. Did you find Cheney, do you believe Cheney to be more principled or pragmatic? What drove him?
I think he was more of a pragmatist. He was sort of, and that's part of the reason that he didn't align with the Trump folks, right? I mean, he was very much from that pragmatic era of sort of the late '80s, early approach politics perhaps differently than he had in the past. So, I think that he looked at the situation, and we were talking about 9/11. Clearly that was a situation where he had to make some very pragmatic decisions, and you could see that even later in his career, he was not necessarily bound by ideology so much as what was best for the sense of what was best for the country.
Chase, help me understand then this part of it. Understanding what we just heard and knowing that, he was in the position of being the one in power, coming into being the vice president and having to then take the back seat. Was there an understanding, an agreement with President Bush II that you will be a more engaged vice president? I will defer to your knowledge, your ability to think. Or was he prepared to step in and be, in horrible term, the second banana, to sit back?
Let's remember that he was chosen for the ticket with George W. Bush because of his experience in national government, particularly national security. George W. Bush had been an outstanding governor of Texas. He ran for president in 2000 on the grounds of becoming an education president because he had forged that reputation as a governor. He wanted to take it, as he did with the No Child Left Behind policy, to the national level. He had not traveled very much in his personal, private life, unlike many an individual, including his own father. So he, in effect, recognized that he needed somebody like Cheney to be his partner. Traditionally, vice presidents are chosen, or shall we say running mates are chosen for political reasons, to balance the ticket, to come from a different part of the country, or maybe a different ideological thought line. In Cheney's case, it was very clear that being from Wyoming with 3 electoral votes was not a political play. It was clearly and emphatically one of having the expertise that Cheney offered.
But I can't help but think back, and correct me where I'm wrong here, I think back to Reagan and Ford back in 1980, where Reagan is saying, or Ford is possibly a VP to Reagan as long as Reagan lets Ford run the government. Is it kind of that same agreement? If I've got that story remembrance correct.
In that brief moment at the Republican convention in 1980, there was a thought that Gerald Ford could supplement Reagan's knowledge of national affairs. That didn't last very long because the notion came that Ford would be, as someone's phrase, a co-president. You can't have that. And I don't think Dick Cheney ever thought of himself as vice president as a co-president. Since vice presidents, once again, have no constitutional or statutory authority, the best that they can be, and Cheney is the best example, is the most influential person, the last person to speak to the president, the last one to give his opinion. And Cheney reinforced that by having a staff in the White House of experts who shadowed, if you will, the president's staff. And all the president's staff knew was that if there was a discussion on a policy matter, that the Cheney staff would take that information back to the vice president, and if and when the moment came, that the vice president was able to speak to the president and convey that point of view.
It's interesting because as we speak about, Dick Cheney's vice presidency, he was often very much considered during that time very conservative. Looking at today's political landscape, do you think he would still be considered very conservative?
He would be. He had a very conservative voting record as a member of the House of Representatives. He had a very conservative notion of what the national government should do. But once again, if we're trying to interpret his
controversy at the time with the government contracts that Halliburton got, and was he steering them, to his old company and all that. It all seems very quaint now compared to some of the political scandals we've had in the 20 years or so since then. So I think that his legacy is going to be one as of this political career that spanned decades and filled all these different roles. Defense Secretary during the Gulf War, and during Desert Storm, and then as we talked about, kind of redefining what the United States Vice President, what their role is.
Chase Untermeyer is a professor of practice at the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston, and Lauren Steffi is a writer at large for Texas Monthly. Chase and Lauren, thank you both for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Pleasure.
And coming up, our current obsessions. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Hold up.
Next time on The Pulse, Lodge McCammon has a routine when he's overcome with anxiety.
I notice the difficult emotion, I pause, I describe it fully, and then I hit send.
He gets a response immediately because he's sharing his feelings with a chatbot.
It calms me down every time.
We'll talk about emotional attachment to bots and how they make us feel.
You can hear that Sunday at 2 p.m.
Splendid isolation.
Listen here for Hour 2 of our appreciation of singer-songwriter Warren Zevon, 2025 inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Warren was simply more literary than most of the other California writers. He had an edgier view of his own life and of their lives.
More thoughtful comments on Warren Zevon music coming here real soon. Saturday evening at 7 on News 88.7.
A popular sheriff emerges from a violent scandal.
Reagan County Sheriff Ron Bailey says his office has updated its training policies after former officers pled guilty to torturing 2 men in January.
But another scandal is already brewing in the jail he oversees.
They call it the Blue Wave.
The Blue Wave.
We're called the Blue Wave.
A blue wave of violence crashes inside a Mississippi jail on the next Reveal.
It's coming up Saturday at 2 p.m.
Support comes from Alley Theater. Performances of A Christmas Carol, presented by UT Health Houston, begins November 16th and features Ebenezer Scrooge and the spirits who teach the meaning of the holiday season. More at alleytheater.org. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Collaborative for Children, advancing early education across Greater Houston by working with caregivers and communities so every child enters school ready to succeed. More at collabforchildren.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Celeste Diaz-Sherman and Ernie Manous.
We are
Welcome back.
We've been working it today. A lot going on, a lot to unpack. I'm happy we had this opportunity with Chase Untermeyer being here with us, because I am always fascinated by, I always think back to, and I know very few of you are going to remember this, but the whole Reagan-Ford thing, and how it was who is going to get the nomination. And that's probably like the last time that we really saw a convention where activity was happening on a convention as opposed to everything having been decided beforehand. And the whole thing about Ford was the incumbent. Well, he had been president, and then Carter had come in. He wanted to be president again, but Reagan was going to be the nominee. Should Ford be the vice president? It was how influential would Ford be? And to have Chase here to actually talk about the similarities of that between what is seen as not fully prepared candidate and getting a really strong VP there. Why are you looking at me like that?
No, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about my first question, and he looked at me and he said, well, let me explain it to you. And I was like, yes, please do. I need, a little refresher. But yes, but you know what time it is, Ernie?
What time is it, Celeste?
It's time for our current obsession.
Oh, I got a good one.
All right. Well, real quick, just for those who are tuning in, our current obsession is the TV show that you run home to continue. It's that song that you have on repeat, or the book, or your Kindle, the book that you're reading on your Kindle that you just can't put down, or it just might be something that is kind of taking up your thoughts. thoughts. Ernie, what is yours?
I've already mentioned it this week on the show already. Squid Game, The Challenge. Squid Game's the TV series, which a bunch of people are trying to get money, and so they all go on this game, and they are killed one by one until one still lives, and they get all the money.
Okay, wait. Squid Game, like the Korean?
Yes. But there is also Squid Game, The Challenge, which is a reality show where they get a bunch of people that play the games.
Based on the move,
They don't kill the contestants that lose, but they have little impacts that blow up on them, and they have to lay on the ground and pretend they're dead. But I'm fascinated by the show. I watched the first season, loved every minute of it, so I was so excited the new season's here. I'm almost all the way through. The finale drops Tuesday, and I'll finally get to see who wins. I'm still an episode and a half behind, so I haven't gotten there yet. It gives me something to live for the weekend. I'm obsessed with this show. I love it. I think the characters in season one, the contestants, not characters, I kind of enjoyed them a little bit more, but I'm enjoying this season too. So that's what I'm going to run home and watch. How about you? What are you obsessed with?
Okay, so I'm feeling a little nostalgic, a little reflective. You know, my birthday's coming up.
I really hadn't heard.
I'm obsessed right now with milestone birthdays. You know, think about when you turn 10 and think about, you know, just going or
just last week.
No. Or if you're, you know, how different you view your birthday when you're turning 30 versus 50 or 80.
I don't know that I view it that different. I kind of host the same kind of birthday parties I had when I was
everybody wears birthday hats.
Oh, I'd love it. You know, and I want the cake to come out with candles, and I want to blow them out, and I want to open my gift. I don't think I've grown up or matured, but you are having a very mature birthday.
I'm having a birthday party, and it's interesting because I throw birthday parties now for my 4-year-old and 9-year-old. I don't have birthday parties anymore.
Well, you're having a big one tomorrow, so we're very excited about that.
Yes.
That's fun.
Any other, you know, give us a call, 713-440-8870. You've got like 2 minutes to get it in.
Alex's, because I've got a story that goes
where I don't see it.
My current obsession this week has been looking for my holiday card I'll be sending to family and friends. I didn't find anything, so I may just make my own. The reason I'm excited about this, I used to get obsessed with sending Christmas cards. I would send everyone handwritten, about 500 of them back when I was in college. I don't know, I got obsessed with it. And my favorite Christmas card, still my favorite Christmas card, I'm sorry if it's kind of off color, but it was a picture of Rudolph sitting in a chair holding a rifle, and behind him on the wall were mounted all the heads of the other reindeer. And it said on the bottom, they used to laugh and call him names. It was from The Far Side. I sent that card every year.
That is very funny. And you know, I will say, as we get closer, that will be one of my obsessions is Christmas cards. I love when people send me their Christmas cards, especially now when they get really clever with family photos, or I have some friends that dress up and do like a theme every year. It'll be very fun.
Well, those are our obsessions. What are yours? Keep sharing them. Alex says she's going to have a party at Dave & Buster's.
To Luby's.
To Luby's. You're going to go from Dave & Buster's to Luby's? You can eat it.
That's interesting. You know, I thought all the Luby's shut down.
Oh, no, I think they're still...
No, a lot of the Luby's shut down. Yes, I used to...
A sad note to leave you on today's show.
I used to love the after church. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for watching and listening to Hello Houston and joining us. We will be back tomorrow with more conversations. And tomorrow we will speak with Houston City Council at-large candidate Dwight Boykins. So get your questions ready. And he's heading into the runoff against Alejandra Salinas. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bullerman, William Menivon, Jen Altine, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro. Introducing Metro Downtown Direct, helping riders get home for the holidays with non-stop service between downtown and Bush Intercontinental Airport. Details at ridemetro.org/500.
This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 1 o'clock.
Funding for Here and Now comes from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software, accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
From NPR and WBOR Boston, I'm Scott Tong.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. It's Here and Now. Coming up, a new trove of Jeffrey Epstein emails is out. Some mention President Trump. A former Republican congressman responds.
We've seen far too often that many Republicans will set aside their better judgment in order to protect the President of the United States. I would certainly not do that on this matter of Jeffrey Epstein.
Also, how long is the arm of the Chinese Communist Party? NPR's Emily Feng says Beijing has many ways to silence critics and artists, even in the U.S.
Not just we'll punish your relatives if you speak to the press, but also if you don't speak to the press, maybe you can have a phone call with your loved ones. Maybe if you do business in China, you can even come back.
And as you prepare for holiday gatherings, we've got tips to help ease social anxiety.
The news is first.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says he is turning his attention to affordability now that the government shutdown is over. NPR's Tamara Keith reports polls show voters are concerned about the economy and cost of living.
A senior administration official not authorized to speak on the record tells NPR Trump will soon travel around the country with a message that while some things have improved, there's still more work to do to help people feeling economic strain. And that was part of Trump's messaging last night at the White House.
My administration and our partners in Congress will continue our work to lower the cost of living, restore public safety, grow our economy, and make America affordable again for all Americans. Again, costs are way down.
Inflation has been persistent so far this year, which has voters in a foul mood about the economy. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Open enrollment for health insurance plans through Obamacare is underway. People like Virginia resident Chris O'Donnell are seeing much higher insurance premiums.
With my wife's diabetes and also her being a cancer survivor, not having insurance is just completely out of the question. I do have enough income that by not putting any money aside for retirement next year, I can redirect that money towards the insurance premium.
President Trump suggested an alternative to Affordable Care Act health subsidies that would send funds directly to people to buy their own health insurance. The tax credits under ACA or Obamacare are set to go away at the end of next month. Well, this hour, President Trump is due to sign an executive order to help young Americans leaving foster care. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the initiative would boost education and job training.
Turn left.
This afternoon, Trump is scheduled to depart the White House to spend the weekend in Florida. With a ceasefire in Gaza, focus shifts on the Strip's reconstruction. But the United Nations says Israeli troops are still demolishing residential buildings there. NPR's Lauren Fair reports from Tel Aviv.
Israel now controls roughly half of Gaza, the eastern side, and that's where the UN says Israeli troops are behind daily detonations of residential buildings. Based on satellite imagery, the BBC says more than 1,500 buildings have been destroyed since a ceasefire more than a month ago. NPR can't independently verify that number. The UN says more than 280,000 homes have been damaged or destroyed since the war began. It also says Palestinians' access to humanitarian aid, public infrastructure, and agricultural land all remain restricted or barred altogether. The Israeli military says it's dismantled underground infrastructure, tunnels used by militants, but did not immediately respond to NPR's request for comment about residential buildings. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News.
Live from the Texas newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. A federal spending bill passed last night officially reopening the government. The bill contains a provision that effectively bans most hemp-derived THC products. President of the Texas Hemp Business Council, Cynthia Cabrera, talked to Texas Public Radio's The Source yesterday prior to the bill's passage. She worried that the ban will force many people to seek alternatives to deal with anxiety and pain.
they're going to turn to the black market, or in the case of many people, they will turn to opioids or some prescription medication that they were able to get away from.
Senator Ted Cruz tried unsuccessfully to remove the provision, arguing states should set their own rules. Applications for the new Texas Education Freedom Accounts, also known as private school vouchers, are slated to open early next year. But most families don't know much about the billion-dollar program. That's according to a new report from Texas Southern University. Mark Jones, the report's co-author, says state officials will need to ramp up public outreach.
An education campaign is critical because only 18% of these parents are very familiar with the program. And for parents to make the best decision for their children, they need to have the most complete information possible.
The report finds economic status plays a big factor in the likelihood of applying. 61% of households with an annual income below $65,000 are very likely to apply, while just 26% of those with a household income of $100,000 or more are very likely to apply. The vouchers are expected to provide more than $10,000 per student for private education each year, with priority given to lower-income households and students leaving public schools. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, providing same-day results and custom treatment plans to tackle allergies at the root of the problem. Over 40 locations throughout Texas. More info at aspireallergy.com.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
For more local news happening in the Houston area, go to our website, houstonpublicmedia.org. This is News 88.7.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Scott Tong in Washington, D.C.
I'm Peter O'Dowd in Phoenix. It's here and now. The federal government has reopened. Last night, when President Trump signed the spending bill that ended the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, he blamed Democrats for the impasse.
So I just want to tell the American people, you should not forget this when we come up to midterms and other things. Don't forget what they've done to our country also.
But last week, it was Democrats who won big in off-year elections. So how will Republicans respond to this political moment? Let's get the view of Charlie Dent. He's a Republican political analyst and former congressman from Pennsylvania. Charlie Dent, welcome.
Great to be with you.
Let's start with today's news. The government is now open after 43 days. How do you think Republicans handled the shutdown?
Well, I don't really think either side came out of this smelling particularly good. Yes, if you look at the polls, it indicated that Republicans were being blamed slightly more than the Democrats for the shutdown. But neither side looked good. You could make the case that Democrats lost the shutdown because they clearly did not achieve their policy objective, which was to extend the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, health insurance premiums and tax credits. So they didn't win there, but they probably will win the war, because I think going forward now, Republicans will be under tremendous pressure to extend those subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. Because
let's talk about that. Charlie Dent, let's talk about that, because clearly this fight isn't over. This is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries last night, just before the House voted to reopen.
Either Republicans finally decide to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits this year, or the American people will throw Republicans out of their jobs next year and end the speakership of Donald J. Trump once and for all.
So as you hinted at, Senate Majority Leader John Thune promised a vote on the subsidies in December. I wonder if you think Republicans have a problem on their hands, because that is going to be a tough vote.
Yeah, this is an enormous problem for Republicans. If they do not extend these subsidies in some form or fashion, millions of Americans are going to experience enormous increases in their health insurance premiums. And you couple that with changes in with the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill on Medicaid, health care will be an enormous issue in the upcoming midterm. And you should remember, too, in 2018, Democrats used health care very effectively to bludgeon Republicans successfully. They picked up a huge majority. And I suspect Democrats will just take a page out of that playbook and run it again. Except this time, the healthcare impacts are much greater than they were back in 2018. So yes, and Republicans, I think, will probably need to extend, at least for 1 year, maybe longer, these tax credits and subsidies under the ACA. I don't see a way out of it. And particularly in the House, Speaker Johnson will be under tremendous pressure from his majority makers, those members who represent swing districts, who are urging him to extend them. And he's got cross pressure from his more conservative members who don't want to extend them.
What about the massive release of documents yesterday from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein? The convicted sex offender mentions the president by name multiple times in personal emails. And there's now enough support in the House to force a vote that would compel the Justice Department to release all of its Epstein documents. How big of a problem is this for the president and for the party?
Well, again, the smart Republicans will vote, to release the Epstein files. What point is there to protect the man who's been, engaged in such horrible conduct against young women? Why would anybody want to protect him? And after the off-year election last week, I think that there'll be more members wanting to push back or find separation between themselves on President Trump, and probably no better place to do it than over the actions of a pedophile. So I think that you'll see the House pass the bill once it ripens. The question is, what will the Senate do once the House passes the bill? And the House will pass the bill. The question is, by what kind of a margin? Could there be a veto-proof majority? I don't know.
I assume you still keep in touch with some congressional Republicans. What's your sense of the moment post-shutdown with Epstein back in full view after these wins for Democrats in recent elections? I mean, what's the feeling there inside the building?
Well, just setting aside the Epstein matter for a moment, I mean, just based on what happened in the off-year election last week, Republicans just had a horrible night. I mean, Democrats, it wasn't shocking that Democrats won. What was shocking were the margins of victory. And I'm not just talking about in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City, and California, where all the attention was. But I'm just looking more granularly at various communities in Pennsylvania, in competitive counties and Republican-leading counties where Democrats just won big, and that happened throughout the country. I think the Republicans know they're running into a headwind, and again, the ones who want to survive in the competitive districts know they're going to need some separation from the president, and that might not be enough in a year like this.
Charlie Dent is a Republican political analyst and former congressman from Pennsylvania. Charlie, thank you.
You bet. Great to be with you. Thanks again.
Get ready to turn right.
Elsewhere on today's show, we're going to take a closer look at what's in the thousands of documents that Republicans and Democrats have released connected to Jeffrey Epstein. You can find that story at hereandnow.org.
This year's UN Climate Summit in Brazil continues this week, and one thing leaders and scientists are surely talking about is sea level rise. A big factor is glaciers melting in the Antarctic. In fact, one glacier there has retreated, that is, shrunk at record speed. Researchers found the Hectoria Glacier retreated 5 miles in 2 months. It's a smallish glacier, was about the size of Philadelphia. Soon after, half its ice was gone. The speed of this retreat is 10 times faster than the previous record. The team is led by glaciologist Naomi Akwat at the University of Colorado Boulder, and she joins us. Naomi, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's talk about how this glacier pulled back at record speed. One video simulation that your colleagues put out is really helpful. It shows that this glacier years ago looked kind of like a tongue. Part of it was attached to the ocean floor, part of it stuck out into the ocean. And then what happened?
So in 2022, there was sea ice in the area, and the sea ice broke away. That exposed the floating tongue that you're talking about to new forces, and that caused the tongue to break up and float away. And then the grounded part of the glacier quickly retreated. Then it restabilized at a higher point, but it has continued to calve and thin ever since then.
Just to kind of understand the speed here, I mean, losing 5 miles or so in 2 months, by our math, about 1.5 football fields per day. How lightning fast is it? How striking is it to you? You watch this all the time.
Well, that is a great question. and something that came up while we were studying this area. So the first part of the research question was around this loss of the fast ice, which was sea ice attached to the shoreline. And as I was monitoring the glaciers, I saw Hectoria retreat more and more and more. And as the time went on, I thought, this is surely unlike anything we've seen. When I looked into the literature, I found that it was in fact an order of magnitude faster than the fastest retreat that we have recorded. In that previous retreat, it was on Columbia Glacier in Alaska, and that was supposed to be the most rapid retreat of a glacier, and yet Hectoria was an order of magnitude faster.
Yeah. I understand the Antarctic, like the Arctic up north, is warming more quickly than the rest of the planet. Is that the main cause here, the warming of the ocean?
Yeah, so you can link the loss of Hectoria to changes in the ocean and the atmosphere from climate change. So the loss of the fast ice was related to the lowest sea ice concentration records that we had, and that allowed a big wave to enter the area, and it broke up the fast ice. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the climate change. That is ultimately what caused Hectoria to begin its rapid retreat.
So Naomi, what are the implications here, not just for other bigger glaciers where this might happen, but also for sea level rise?
So, as you mentioned before, Hectoria is not the largest glacier in Antarctica. It's quite small for Antarctic standards, although you would be impressed if you saw it, because it is fairly large. And so losing part of Hectoria doesn't do much for sea level rise. However, the process that we found during this study could have implications for sea level rise if it occurs on a larger glacier.
Oh, shit.
And that's the presence of this ice plain, which is a low-lying region that the glacier sits upon.
Splits off
and
is
if you
wicked,
have a big external environmental change, like what we saw at Hectoria with the loss of its floating tongue, where that glacier thins and then it goes afloat very quickly, that could have implications for sea level rise if it occurred on much larger glaciers. The problem is that we don't quite know where ice plains are around Antarctica and if they could be at risk of this process. So it might be fine, but it might not be.
It might be fine, right. Well, I live in Virginia, where one island off the coast is largely submerged by 2/3 because of sea level rise. This should at least, I imagine, be something that low-lying island nations, coastal cities should be paying pretty close attention to, yeah?
I think overall we need to be paying close attention to what's happening in Antarctica. More and more we keep finding these processes that show things are changing faster than what we were expecting. This is one of those processes that we need to keep investigating in order to really untangle what is the worst that could happen and what's the best that could happen as well.
We've been talking to Naomi Akwat, glaciologist at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Naomi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Hear It Now.
Listening to News 88.7.
Clothing prices are ticking up thanks to inflation and tariffs, and more people are saying they don't have to buy new stuff, they'll rent it instead.
I don't really want to hang on to pieces forever. The trends will have changed, my taste might have changed.
I'm Elsa Chang. The rising popularity of clothing rentals on All Things Considered from NPR News.
You can hear it today at 3 o'clock. It's 1:19. Let's check on the weather. Here's ABC 13 meteorologist Rachel Bryars.
Hey everyone, get ready for a gorgeous rest of your day today. Partly cloudy skies and some warm
warm temperatures as we head into the rest of your afternoon as well as into the evening. Our high temperature is going to be topping out in those low to mid 80s with the high temperature right around 83 degrees here in Houston. Then overnight, things get a bit cool again. Friday morning starting off at 60 degrees with a high temperature right around 84 degrees. I'm ABC 13 meteorologist Rachel Bryers for News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
Support comes from Theater Under the Stars, bringing you a forecast snowy white with Irving Berlin's Broadway musical White Christmas. On stage at the Hobby Center December 9th through Christmas Eve. Tickets available at tuts.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and your NPR station, and from BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public.
It's Here and Now. Chinese voices critical of the Chinese Communist Party are increasingly going quiet. It's not just political dissidents. Last week, a New York film festival showcasing Chinese directors abruptly canceled after many filmmakers backed out. Festival organizer says the Chinese government pressured the families of those participating, and this is just one of many incidents of this kind. NPR international correspondent Emily Feng joins me in NPR Studio 43 here in D.C. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Scott. It's great to be in the studio with you.
I understand these Chinese filmmakers, some are based inside China, some outside China. How were they harassed or pressured?
So this is what we think happened because none of the directors wanted to accept an interview. But just a couple days before the film festival was going to kick off in New York City, the festival organizer got this avalanche of emails from about 30 of the 40 directors whose films were going to be shown. The emails were all very similar, and they included some variation of, after a deep thought or reflection, I've decided to pull my film, pull all of the promotional materials, do not include it in your rundown list, and we're really sorry, but we're also going to cancel our flights to New York. We can't attend the festival anymore. Zhu said people he'd worked with in China were also contacted by Chinese security agents, and through his former colleagues, these agents warned Zhu of this. They're basically saying they warned him not to smear the motherland, and he doesn't really know exactly what they're referring to.
Yeah, well, you and I have been based in China where this kind of pressure censorship is known and overt. Emily, this is New York City.
Right. This is an example of what many researchers call transnational repression. And the fact that people in China wanted to shut down a film festival in New York shows just how far the authorities in Beijing are willing to go. I called Yolkin Oloyal about this. He is a China-focused researcher at the advocacy group Human Rights Watch who has researched transnational repression extensively. And he defines it as, China being able to pressure and change how people act, what they say, even when these people live outside of China.
I think it's everybody who does not agree with the Chinese Communist Party central ideology and who challenge Beijing.
And in this case, some of the directors, yes, they were Chinese-born with family in China, but they live in North America, in Europe, in the African continent. Not all of them lived in China. But Zhu Ruquin, this festival organizer you've just heard from, fears that just like with his family, Chinese security officials pressured them, and that's why they pulled their films. And this just doesn't happen to mainland people. You can think about Hong Kong activists who have had arrest bounties put on them even though they no longer live in Hong Kong, or in the last couple of years, another story I've covered a lot, ethnic Uyghurs, this Turkic minority who live in China who have family members threatened or even imprisoned within China because their relatives abroad are speaking out against Chinese ethnic policy. And Aloyal at Human Rights Watch pointed to another incident of pretty clear transnational repression this year, which was this Bangkok art exhibition in Thailand shut down after Chinese diplomats there objected to the Hong Kong and Tibetan activists show. So even art and media events are a focus of transnational repression.
You mentioned Hong Kong, which of course where the Chinese Communist Party is cracking down in dissent. It's put critics in prison, put a newspaper publisher in prison. A few years ago, an NBA executive with the Houston Rockets, tweeted out support for Hong Kong democracy protesters. Then the Chinese government said, okay, state TV, we're going to stop streaming Houston Rockets games. When you think about the tools of the Chinese government, economic pressure is a big one, isn't it?
Yep, it's not just going after your loved ones, but if you have significant financial interests in China and you need access to the Chinese market, that is a way that Beijing has been able to
video game companies, filmmakers, all of that. Yeah?
Yep, clothing brands, airline companies, the list goes on.
You know, we're running a separate segment on our show today on George Orwell. You know what messages he may have for today. He famously wrote, "The imagination, like certain wild animals, will not breed in captivity." And the suggestion is at a certain point, the imagination will be limited and artists will self-censor, right? To not even approach what they think the line is. How much of a concern is that, you think, for Chinese artists?
It's a huge concern. It's one of the top concerns that even if, like Zhu Ruquin, who organized this festival in the US because you couldn't continue doing the same festival in China, that even when you move countries, the same pressures follow you.
Is there something governments, including the US government, can do to push back?
It's a very, very difficult issue. You know, there was a similar bill going through the California legislature that wanted to crack down on transnational repression of the Indian community in California, specifically to protect Sikh Americans there. That bill was ultimately vetoed by the California governor because there were concerns that it would overly restrict and overly scrutinize the actions of Hindu Americans. And this concern that by trying to address transnational repression, you're also then racially profiling Chinese or Chinese Americans is a concern among the same group of people who have been affected, victimized by transnational repression. So I think a greater awareness of it is helping, and certainly this is why the organizer of this festival is coming forward. But even he doesn't have a clear solution about how to stop pressure on people who are in China.
Yeah. Emily, you mentioned the Uyghurs, members of this Muslim ethnic minority in China. You've done stories on the striking repression, imprisonments, Uyghurs disappearing from their homes in Xinjiang in northwest China. One Uyghur activist here in D.C., there are many in the area here, and she said many Uyghurs locally used to attend public events in town to tell the world what's happening. Now, she says, they mostly stay home because authorities have found ways to have them not go. What do you see?
Beijing is able to offer not just sticks but carrots. They can dangle access back to China as a way to silence dissent or to stifle participation in events. So not just will detain and punish your relatives if you speak to the press in the US, but also if you don't speak to the press, maybe you can have a phone call with your loved ones. Maybe if you do business in China, you can even come back and reestablish those economic ties.
And people are going back, yeah?
Absolutely.
That's NPR's international correspondent, Emily Feng. Emily, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
On today's show, we've heard about the rapid glacial melting that scientists have discovered in Antarctica. Experts say an important way to cut the emissions that are heating the planet is for fossil fuel producing countries to stop exploring for new fossil fuels. One country's government decided to do just that. Colombia. NPR's Julia Simon reports.
In a fishing village on Colombia's Caribbean coast, music plays in cafes lining the beach. It is cooler by the sea, where the wind blows through the trees. Out past the fishing boats, out in the turquoise sea, oil companies found deep water natural gas and plan to drill gas wells there. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, wants those wells to be among the country's last. Colombia is the biggest coal producer in South America and one of the region's largest oil producers. And President Petro is one of the world's most outspoken leaders on climate change. 2 years ago at the UN Climate Conference, Petro took the stage and said this.
Colombia ha dejado de firmar contratos de exploración de carbón, petróleo y gas.
Colombia, he says, has stopped signing exploration contracts for coal, oil, and gas. This was a big deal. Stopping new exploration for fossil fuels is a key way to transition away from fossil fuels. Now the question is, how is Colombia's energy transition playing out?
Hola, so estoy grabando aquí. Okay.
To find out, I went to a leafy neighborhood in central Bogotá and the high-rise office of Colombia's national oil company, Ecopetrol. There I met
Julian Lemos,
Corporate Vice President of Strategy and New Business. Lemos says the oil company is diversifying. Ecopetrol has acquired an electricity transmission company, more solar and wind projects, and they're investing in geothermal, drilling deep into the earth to create electricity.
The hydrocarbon business will remain as part of our company, but we will gradually increase the participation of businesses that are not related to crude oil, such as renewable power transmission.
Energy experts say this isn't just a good move for the climate, it's a good move for Colombia's economy. Colombia has manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture, but the government is still very reliant on the oil and coal sectors for revenues. Ana Carolina González Espinosa at the nonprofit Natural Resource Governance Institute says as Colombia's oil reserves shrink and demand for oil and coal eventually fall, that will be a problem.
If we don't think about how to diversify the economy, then we are going to be in trouble.
Key to diversifying the energy sector is solar and wind. Solar, in particular, is growing, both large-scale and small-scale projects for communities lacking electricity. But the sector has problems, too. In some parts of Colombia, the grid still isn't big enough to handle all the new solar and wind. Many projects are on land belonging to indigenous communities. The government and private sector still haven't done enough to involve them in planning, says Margarita Nieves, a renewable energy researcher. She says some renewable developers have left.
Each project has its own challenges.
Petro's term ends in 2026, and that raises another question. Will his energy policies outlast him? Petro's government hasn't awarded new licenses to explore for fossil fuels, but this isn't signed into law. A new right-wing government could change gears and bring in more companies to explore for coal, oil, and gas. So, is Colombia's energy transition story a happy one? González Espinosa has thoughts.
It is not a happy story. It is not a sad story. It's just a real story.
Julia Simon, NPR News, Bogotá, Colombia.
It's Here and Now.
Live from NPR News in Boston, I'm Josie Guarino. Federal employees are going back to work after President Trump signed into law a short-term spending package that narrowly passed the House last night. Government services are expected to reopen in the coming days, while disruptions to air travel will likely ease a bit ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. The Federal Aviation Administration had reduced air traffic because of staff shortages during the 43-day shutdown. The body of a coal miner was found this morning in a mine that flooded in southern West Virginia. Crews found the body inside the Rolling Thunder mine near Belva. It's about 50 miles east of the state capital of Charleston. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey said a mining crew had hit an unknown pocket of water last Saturday, which flooded after an old mine wall was compromised. More than a dozen other miners were found safe. The Eiffel Tower in Paris is lit in French colors, blue, white, and red, to mark the 10th anniversary of terrorist attacks that killed 132 people and injured hundreds. The 2015 attacks included gunfire at cafes, explosions at stadiums, and a massacre at a concert hall. Today's commemorations also included tributes led by French President Emmanuel Macron and the unveiling of a new memorial garden. This is Here and Now.
The energy capital of the world is reinventing itself, and the next generation of leaders will decide what the future looks like.
Welcome to Bauer Business Focus. I am Dr. Vanessa Patrick, Associate Dean for Research at the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston.
And I'm Greg Bean, Executive Director of the Gutierrez Energy Management Institute at the Bauer College of Business. Houston has powered the energy world for generations, and is still the place where the future of energy is being built. What's changing is the kind of talent that the industry needs. Energy today isn't just about fossil fuels, it's also about emerging low-carbon energy sources and the growing electrification of energy use. While many traditional energy industry skills will continue to be relevant, the next wave of energy professionals will also need to be fluent in new energy technologies, innovation, data analytics and AI, and sustainability.
This has been Bauer Business Focus from the Bauer College of Business, sponsored by Texas Mutual Insurance Company. More episodes at houstonpublicmedia.org/Bauer.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston, where the program is produced, and MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And the Music Emporium, guitar sellers for more than 55 years, celebrating the enduring presence of music made on the front porch and center stage. You can learn more at themusicemporium.com.
Yeah, bro. Why?
This is the Engines of Our Ingenuity. From Houston Public Media, News 88.7.
Today, go forth and multiply. The University of Houston's College of Engineering presents this series about the machines that make our civilization run and the people whose ingenuity created them.
Yo, gang.
Quick, what's 2 times 3? Okay, that's not so bad, but what's 7 times 8? We all go through it at one time or another, learning the dreaded times tables. They're a prerequisite for learning basic arithmetic. With 10 digits, 0 through 9, we have 55 pairs to memorize. About half are quite easy. 0 times 7, 1 times 4. But for the other half, it's drill, drill, drill. The process isn't that complicated, but it could be simpler using a different number system. One of my favorites is the unary system. To write down the number 3 in unary, put 3 ones next to each other. 5 is written as a string of 5 ones. Pretty simple. And here's the fun part. Multiplication in unary is easy. To calculate 3 times 5, there's nothing to memorize. Simply place 3 strings of 5 ones next to each other. That gives us a string of 15 ones, the number 15 in unary. Addition, subtraction, and division are just as easy. With the unary number system, we can learn all the basic arithmetic operations in just a few minutes. So why don't we use unary numbers? For the simple reason that they take too long to write down. With the 10 digits in our decimal system, I can write down very large numbers with little effort. The age of the universe is estimated at around 14 billion years. I can write that with just 11 digits in our decimal system. Not bad. In unary, it would take, 14 billion digits. The price we pay for our compact decimal numbers is learning our times tables. But there's no need to jump from 1 all the way to 10 digits. We can use any number of digits to build a number system. Computers find it easiest to work with the 2 digits 0 and 1. These binary digits are called bits. It takes 34 bits to write down the age of the universe. That's more than the 11 of our decimal system, but the computer has much simpler times tables.
Whatever, gang. Yo, enjoy your day or whatever. Catch us later. I gotta fix truck some. I don't know what happened with my steering wheel.